So I have the recording in progress. Let's get started. Welcome to this March 7th, 2022 first meeting of the new Logistics Industry Sector Council. For the record, I'm Amy Fleming, and I am the Program Development and Engagement Specialist with the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. Since joining GOIN just about a year ago, reestablishing the state's industry sector councils has been my priority project. This first meeting will provide some fundamental information to set expectations for future meetings and help get us used to the format and requirements under open meeting law. Although there are no items that require action on this agenda, I'm going to take role of the voting members to confirm a quorum. So please let me know you are present when your name is called. Mark Janum.
Present.
Doug Min.
It's Dong Min. I'm present.
Dong,
Yeah.
I have that here. Thank you. Present. Scott Muehlrath.
Good afternoon. Present. Thank you, Amy.
Dale South.
Present.
Gary Watson.
Present.
Amy Williams.
Present.
And Perry Williams. I don't see. All right, so I hereby affirm that this March 7th, 2022 Logistics Industry Sector Council meeting has reached a quorum. I further affirm that the agenda and notice for this meeting was properly posted pursuant to Nevada's open meeting law, NRS 241.020. So continuing to agenda item number 3, I'm delighted to recognize Isla Young, Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation, to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Amy, and good afternoon to everyone. Before I say a few things, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize Amy and all of the work that has gone into relaunching our industry sector councils. Well done, well done. So I'm Isla. I serve as Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. We go by GOIN. Today's a really special day, and we thank all of you, our industry sector council members, for your commitment and willingness to serve on our Logistics Industry Sector Council. As Nevada works to provide a strong and seamless workforce ecosystem for Nevadans, it is incredibly important that your voice, all of your voices, are at the table and that we have access to all of your amazing expertise and insights. And truly, all of those pieces are pulled together with our workforce ecosystem to have the most seamless and supportive that we can have in Nevada. So we're looking forward to working with all of you, and thank you again for your willingness to serve in this role.
Thank you, Isla. So there's another key GOIN team member that you should all be familiar with. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and I recognize Andreas Fijo, liaison to the Governor's Workforce Development Board, to introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Amy. I also want to add to what Isla said. I really appreciate all the work that's been done with this, and I want to really congratulate all of the industry sector council members for agreeing to serve and taking time out of your schedules. As Amy said, my name is Andres Fijo. I am the board liaison to the Governor's Workforce Development Board. I am excited to be here today to observe this meeting. The industry sector councils are an important branch of the state board, and I'm happy to see that they're back up and running again. And I certainly hope that the discussion and insights that are generated from these meetings can be very useful in helping to guide workforce development efforts and policy in the state. So great to be here.
Great, thank you. So I'll move to agenda item number 4. Seeing as the councils have been inactive for a bit, the GOIN team has taken the opportunity to look at these bodies with fresh eyes. And we've spent nearly a year looking through the legal requirements, researching best practices, meeting with stakeholders, many stakeholders, and revising drafts again, and so on. And so I'm going to share my screen and walk through some of the fundamentals of where we've landed. It's complicated. There we go. Okay. Do you see my presentation? Okay, and not my notes. Okay. All right. So many of you have seen some version of this as it was being developed, but I'm now pleased to present the plan as it's being implemented. So you can hold your questions until the end, or you can put them in the chat, and I will check there later in the presentation. So first things first, I wanted to start by level setting with some Zoom and meeting etiquette. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Our moderators, Andreas and Chelsea, will also help to take care of that for you if you are unmuted and your background noise is creating a distraction. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged before unmuting. You can go ahead and rename yourself, which I will also do as an example, to include your name. Oh, there we go. So your name, your organization or company, and then whether you are a partner or an employer. And this will come into play later when we are engaging in a facilitated conversation. So I'm Amy Fleming. I am with Goen, and I am a partner at this meeting. Okay. If you're not quite sure how to identify if you're a partner or an employer, we will get to a little bit of that on the next slide. So you can use the chat box during these meetings to ask questions, and introduce yourself if you'd like, and you can share contact information there, but please do not deliberate on agenda items in the chat. This is really important to make sure that we are in compliance with open meeting laws. So on the right side of the screen, I've included a few functional meeting best practices. This is something I took from a City of Reno workshop, which was facilitated by the Center for Story-Based Strategy. I just love these as they really help to get everybody on the same page and kind of agree to some terms of the meeting here. So first, it's important to be curious and creative when we're talking through some of these big issues. Second, remember there's just one microphone, and we'll help you with that if you forget, but we do encourage you to let others speak and try to remember to be called on. I like this acronym a lot, which is WAIT, which is why am I talking and why am I not talking? It's just an internal reflection to help build meaningful engagement with the group. So by being here, you consent to active facilitation. So you can raise your hand to be called on, but if it helps to get the conversation started, I may call on you even if your hand is not raised. So finally, I really love this one, is to throw glitter and not shade, which really creates an environment of trust and respect, leading to growth mindset, collective problem solving, and all those good things. So if you hear a reminder to throw glitter, then this is what I'm referring to. Okay. So you'll be given an opportunity to contribute to these meetings, and will need to identify as either an employer or a system partner. An employer hires individuals in the relevant industry, and a partner supports the industry or system. You may be both, depending on the topic or conversation. So for example, this comes up a lot. A representative from higher education may be looking to hire an individual in the field, like a nursing instructor or another professional with experience in that field. But they're also developing and running programs to support the system. So depending on where the conversation is, they may fall on either side of that line. Okay, so this slide includes a lot of text, and reference to the governing statute for these councils. I will not read through all of this, but it's all to say that these are legally mandated entities that must check a few specific boxes. Beyond that, the vision for the councils is to serve as a formal advisory committee representing a mix of employers, labor, education, and others that provide feedback and guidance to state agencies and systems to strengthen alignment of current and future state resources. There's a lot in that nice run-on sentence, but it's good. The meetings are designed to harness the employer experience, insights, and intelligence in order to strengthen the system. We are committed to leveraging your time to maximize engagement and be inclusive and transparent as possible. Okay, so here we want to make sure to articulate the alignment with the state's plan for recovery and resilience and other economic development priorities. That plan was published by GOED and it's on their website, and I would be happy to, I will provide that link for you. And we work very closely with the Governor's Office of Economic Development through the development of the Sector Council Plan. The key takeaways here on this slide are that we intend to build on identified strengths in workforce and education and address some opportunities for improvement. It's important to acknowledge that the workforce development system and alignment activities are immensely broad. There are a number of regional networks that are meeting currently or soon will be meeting to discuss similar priorities. And there's an opportunity to go a step beyond that to address some sub-industries or other various facets. So this is just a representation of how these conversations might be structured across the state. We will be sharing opportunities to engage with regional entities and are making sure to share takeaways and learn from each other's conversations with those regional and sub-industry groups that do exist. Okay, so you've already heard reference to voting members of this body and have also heard reference to engaging in open discussion. So this slide visualizes the similarities and differences of these groups. As you can see, most of the conversation between the groups is not delineated, right? These are the same text between these two. But what is delineated is this distinction between employers and partners. So we have different sections of the agenda that will be targeted at those two groups. Voting members will be asked to vote on items that have been agendized for action. So that's some of the things down here. Okay, so you may have also noticed some of the formality around how these groups have been assembled, what's included on our agenda, and how we speak to one another, and who's permitted to speak and when. And this is because these meetings are governed by Nevada open meeting law. So I boiled down the key takeaways to what you see here, which will also be made available after the meeting. So ultimately, if you're wondering about why this is so formal or the procedure, it likely comes down to being in compliance with this law. Just to highlight a few things, that items can only be voted on if there's a quorum. For this group, that means that 4 of the 7 voting members are present. And we are also required to vote to post the agenda publicly well in advance of the meeting, and the agenda must include accessibility instructions as well as items that will require action. We cannot take action on items unless they are published in the agenda in advance. We are also required to allow time for public comment, and will do so at the end of these meetings. Finally, minutes will be taken and posted after they're approved at the following meeting, which will be an agendized action item. Okay, so each each meeting will follow a similar structure. This is to help set expectations and provide consistency. So at each meeting, we will begin with employer introductions, some of the details you see referenced here. The next segment will focus on workforce and economic data with the opportunity again for employers to provide their reflections. After that, there will be a partner presentation. And this will be focused on some of the top issues that have been shared in previous meetings. Again, followed by employer feedback. Finally, we'll open the floor to our partners in the room to introduce themselves and give a brief overview of their work and share a program or opportunity that's most relevant to an issue raised in the previous meeting. I'm going to draw your attention to these times on the right-hand side. These are there to set expectations of the duration of each of these items. There is not time to be completely comprehensive in the feedback or the updates that you might provide. But we hope that you can stay focused on some of the items listed here to remain relevant and valuable to partners in the meeting. So over time, quarter by quarter, we anticipate that this will become a beautiful and robust landscape for this sector. All right, last slide here. So what's it all for? A big important question. So after the meeting, a summary report will be generated based on the feedback and information shared. It's going to be shared with the Governor's Workforce Development Board and published on our website. And it will inform many of the entities you see here. This is really just an initial list of some of the ideas or some of the areas that will be influenced by your feedback. We also anticipate that employers will be asked to support grant applications, program development, and other areas where that feedback, timely feedback is important to our partners. Okay, so I'm gonna check for questions. I saw one hand raised, but it's gone now. So I'm gonna check the chat. Mark, did you have a question?
No, I think I inadvertently touched my screen as I was zooming in and out, so I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Are there any other questions? Okay. I'm gonna close this. All right, wonderful. So all of your questions were answered. Okay. No questions. All right, so since there are no questions, we can move on to agenda item number 5, which is employer introductions. So here is where you can raise your hand to get in the queue for your feedback. So I'm going to share something using the whiteboard feature. There we go. As a reminder, these are the types of things that we are looking for your employer introduction. So I can go around the room and call on folks, or you can raise your hand if you would like to jump in. But we're looking for your name, your company, your role within that company, and then your top hard to fill, urgent to fill, or in-demand positions. So these are the roles in your company that are really top of mind for you right now. It's also an opportunity to share any acute barriers to attracting or retaining talent that you've been working through over the past few months. Since this is the first meeting, there might be a long list of things that come to mind, but we're thinking that over time, those trends are going to start to become clear. So if you can think of these most timely and relevant issues. If you can keep your comments within the scopes of this, then I think we can get to everybody without a problem. All right. So I see no hands raised, so I'm going to start calling on you to give your introductions. Mark, if you want to go ahead and get us started.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Thank you, Amy. My name is Mark Janung. I'm with a company called Iris Automation located in Reno, Nevada. I'm the Vice President of Operations for for that company. I'm responsible for the safe and efficient testing of our technology, the production of our technology, and the customer support we provide to those customers. Our current tough to fill positions include computer vision engineers, senior simulation type firm engineers, and senior deep learning engineers. And our fundamental barriers have been that most of these folks we have found to date have been out of Silicon Valley. Half of our company is in Reno, Nevada. The other half, 40 some odd souls total, is distributed throughout the country. But this kind of talent that we're finding, typically we find concentrated in the Silicon Valley area. And our challenge remains being able to attract those folks to work for a startup compared to some of the legacy larger companies with better benefits and better opportunities and things like that. So that's a constant pilfering kind of a challenge that we have. So just having those kind of folks like that here in the Reno, Nevada area would be really interesting to us, because most of the folks are here because they love the area and love what it's all about here in Northern Nevada. So that's probably my biggest head hurter in terms of manpower.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Can you repeat the name of that first, the type of engineer? It just kind of glitched for a second. I want to make sure.
Yes. Sorry, a computer vision engineer.
Vision
engineers. Yeah, because vision engineering is being applied, and it's just a host of different kind of things, and that's our fundamental bread and butter. We look at the sky and look at pixels and recognize the vehicular tracks, and any number of companies are Tesla, of course, is trying to replace all the lidar and radar on their vehicles with all camera systems, and so there's just a tremendous demand across a wide variety of verticals.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dale, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dale South. I work for Sephora, the .com here in Las Vegas. Right now, we just rolled out, or we're in the process of rolling out weekend shift, first shift, and in a few months we're going to do weekend shift, second shift. And our hardest to fill roles have been the top level leadership, so the managers and supervisors. And we've kind of gotten a mixture of kind of reactions of, one, it's other people are doing the same hiring around us. We've got a lot of industry coming up, buildings popping up left and right around us, and people are making rolling decisions. So if we're not their first interview, we see people getting offers before we even have a chance to interview them. And then the second kind of barrier is people are having the same issue retaining talent as we are. So we see a lot of people, once they know that their employees are interviewing elsewhere, they make equal or better offers to keep them where they are. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Dong, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dong Min. I'm the CFO for Nova Logistics. We're a company that is headquartered in Reno. We've been headquartered here for about 20 years. Most of our operations are actually out of state, and probably in the last 2 to 3 years, we've been trying to build a presence here in the Reno area. More so because me and my partner are both from Reno, and I think we're getting older and kind of getting sick of the road warrior thing. So, and obviously there's a lot of opportunity happening in this area. Currently, so we do have a smaller operation out at the industrial center next to the Tesla Gigafactory. So, any of the frontline general warehousing, material handling operators, I think has been a challenge. Our headcount here is around 30-ish. We're probably trying to grow to about 50-ish, so it's manageable. Some of our other locations out of state are 200 plus FTE. So I think so far we've been doing good, just kind of with our culture. Our work shift is just a day shift. So we have a lot of positive things going for us, but there's just a ton of competition out there. We're already starting to worry about the season, the Christmas holiday season, and some of the retailers out there and some of the incentives that they're going to be offering, for the general warehousing type position. So our costs of labor have gone up tremendously just to try to retain our talent. So just not knowing where the top is on that. I think that's a concern. But so far, I think we've been doing good just because our accounts are not as demanding.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Are there other employers represented? Trying to look before I move it over to some of the our employer networking groups. All right, so I'd like to recognize there are a number of individuals that are present that work with employers day in and day out. That is their role, is to represent the employer voice. So we have chambers of commerce represented, and I'm not sure if some of the labor representatives are able to speak to that, some of the schools, but this is the portion where if you can speak to your what you're hearing from employers regarding the similar issues of their top hard to fill roles or any acute barriers to attracting or retaining talent in aggregate or specifics to company conversations you've had for the logistics, operations, distribution, and warehousing sectors. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Scott Muellrath, President and CEO of the Henderson Chamber of Commerce, and we're about a 1,700 member organization. We actually have more members outside of Henderson than inside, so definitely a regional business advocacy group. We have a very strong interest in membership base in the spec industrial market, distribution, logistics. A lot of large employers, particularly in West Henderson, that have been coming into the market. So whether that's some of the tried and trues, we've had FedEx as one of our initial staples out there, but even like Levi's has brought all of their e-commerce to West Henderson. Of course, Amazon and Smith's and Kroger, and lots of distribution that we're tied to. So we obviously have rather acute interests in how all the dots connect, whether that's moving the product or the hiring and workforce space. We know it's intensely competitive, and talking to all of our employer members that are hiring, continuously hiring, and many of them are, experiencing, having to do wage growth of up to 20% in just the last 6 months. Along a lot of the entry jobs that are the $16 to $20 an hour floor jobs. And I'm just to reiterate what some of my peers have said, that lots of challenges in the upper management and white collar space as far as finding the right employees as well. So
Yeah.
For that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else that wanted to share from that employer demand side? Well, you have certainly given us a lot to think about as we are working to strengthen alignment with these the available programs. So I'm going to stop that. All right. Okay. So I'm going to move on then to the data portion of our agenda. The next couple of items include presentations from two key agency partners, state agency partners. After these presentations, we will again open up the floor for employer feedback and reactions. So first, agenda item number 6, I recognize David Schmidt, Chief Economist with the Research and Analysis Division of the Nevada Department of Training, Employment, and Rehabilitation. During this presentation, please take note of key indicators that either resonate with your experience or differ from your experience. Great. You should be able to share, David. There you go.
All right, wonderful, thank you. And to repeat what Amy just said, for the record, my name is David Schmidt. I'm the Chief Economist for the Research and Analysis Bureau of the Nevada Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. And I have 18 slides to share with you and 5 to 10 minutes to do it. So I'm told I often talk fast, so please forgive me if I am doing just that. Let me, I think you always see in my desktop, and that's not what it was supposed to be showing. So brave new world here. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thumbs up. There we go. Thank you very much. So just high level about where we are in the economy right now. Last Thursday, we came out with our revisions to the 2021 employment data, as well as our January 2022 data. And just at the highest level, the news was really good for Nevada. We've had an upward revision through 2021 of about 50,000 jobs, largely in the casino hotel industry. This puts us on a pretty fast track toward recovery, which you can see on this slide, comparing the current recession in blue to the last 2 recessions, where we definitely took a much larger hit, but the pace of the recovery really since the bottom in May of 2020 has been pretty rapid through the economy as a whole. Looking at the revisions that we did, the logistics and operations sector, as it was sort of traditionally defined in the past, is highlighted there at the bottom at 3 main levels, which is transportation, warehousing and utilities, wholesale trade, and then a higher level roll-up of those 2 that also includes retail trade, which is trade, transportation, and utilities. And you can see overall transportation and warehousing and utilities saw a bit of a bump in blue above the previous estimates in red. So we're in a slightly better position than we originally thought we were as of 2021 heading into next year. The next couple of charts show for the state, as well as the Las Vegas and Reno areas, the jobs that we lost in red from February of 2020 to May of 2020, and then what we've gained since May of 2020 through the most recent data. And where the numbers are in red, we have yet to recover those jobs that were lost in the first 2 months of the pandemic, and where they're in green, we've more than recovered what was lost. And you can see, if you look down the left, trade, transportation, and utilities is one of those areas where we've seen significant additional jobs added over the course of this February of 20 to January of 2022 period, where we're up 17,600 jobs, by far the largest of anything. If you scroll or look down the chart, the next largest one you see is 16,900. That's the transportation, warehousing, and utilities piece of that total. And so really the transportation and warehousing piece has been one of the biggest drivers of the job growth that we've seen. And areas where we're diversifying away, where casino hotels have been the industry that has really taken the biggest hit, still being down about 37,000 jobs. The logistics sector, as well as other areas like manufacturing, financial activities, and others, are helping to grow in their share of the market. To quickly flip through and not read everything for Las Vegas and Reno, this is true in Las Vegas, where we're up 16,600 jobs in trade, transportation, and utilities, as well as Reno, where we're up 3,200 jobs. I will also note for the Reno Sparks area, one of the things that came out of this revision was we had been running just below our pre-pandemic employment levels. After revision, we're about 1,600 jobs higher. We set a new peak in October of last year, and that has continued through January. And so the Reno area has unemployment that as of last December was in the 3%, just under 3% range, which is a really tight labor market. The employment levels have also expanded beyond where they were before the pandemic as well. This chart shows an animation that shows the shifting level of recovery as we move through 2020 and 2021 to the present. And as you can see, areas becoming less green or less red and more green, you can see the relative share of employment recovery in those sectors. And so I'd highlight on the top left area, you have wholesale trade, which is part of the logistics and operations sector, and also transportation, warehousing, and utilities, which is the brightest green spot, as we would expect in that second column over. Even though the accommodation industry is only about 80% recovered, though, it's still a pretty large piece of the state overall. And so you can see the impact of that industry, where just about everything else outside of accommodation, government, and other services, just about everywhere you look, you're 99% or more recovered compared to the pre-recession peak employment. But nowhere is that more true than in the transportation, warehousing, and utilities industry. Looking at what that looks like in terms of absolute levels of employment in Las Vegas and Reno, you can see that here, where both in Reno and in Las Vegas, you see the 2020 recession was a blip that basically had almost no impact on overall employment levels here, which have just been pushing higher and have been doing that for the last several years, both in the North and the South. Switching to state unemployment, these revisions also push down our state unemployment rate from 6.4% to 5.3% as of December, which is down to 5.2% as of January. So the state as a whole is in a much better spot. This is probably most evident in the Las Vegas area, because that was the area that had been noticeably higher than the state as a whole. And so these revisions will probably be largely reflected in that area, though local unemployment data revised won't be available until roughly the end of April. But that's kind of what I expect to see based on this statewide number. This chart shows the history of Nevada's unemployment rate. And one of the things that I think is really worth people knowing is just how different the 2020 recession was from the other typical recessions that we see. Typically, a recession kind of rolls in, unemployment starts to rise, some businesses start to close, but there's a multi-year rise and fall in the unemployment rate. And then you get to the 2020 pandemic recession, and you can see the number spikes and it drops. And that has a lot of implications for how we think about the labor market, what people's expectations are, as well as just the rapid shift that it's caused in all sorts of businesses. Obviously, the supply chain issues have been a national talking point about how the attempts to get this supply chain in place and running in a really rapid pace when something this big hits the economy is one of those challenges that nationally we're still kind of grappling with. But I think it's also worth noting, as you saw in the previous chart, Nevada's unemployment rate had been number one, number two in the country. During the pandemic, we had the highest unemployment rate for any state ever. And it wasn't even close by like more than 10 percentage points. It was a wild number. But we are back to being about the 8th highest in the country, still above average, but no longer that number one with a bullet kind of place, because in the North, it's already really tight. If you're talking a 2% unemployment rate, you're already talking about areas like Utah, North Dakota, South Dakota that just have traditionally incredibly low unemployment rates. And even in Las Vegas, where we're running something in that 5 to 6% range. One of the interesting numbers for me is that the average unemployment rate in Nevada from 2015 to 2019 was 5.2%, and that's exactly where we are in January. So in that, not recovering from the depths of recession, but actually like economic expansion kind of territory in terms of the economy, that's roughly where we are in the state and what the job market kind of looks like. Just one more way to highlight that, if we look at February and the weekly unemployment claims that are being filed, we are, as of 2022, at the lowest level since 1990 in terms of people filing weekly claims for unemployment benefits. It's just a bit lower than where we were in 1999 and 2006. But if you look at the slope of this graph, you can see it's basically a continuation of where we were right before the pandemic. Again, it rolled in fast and it went out fast. And that is reflected across a lot of our data. Looking specifically at the logistics and operations sector. In red, you can see here the pace of employment growth since 2014 has been noticeably different both before and after the recession, where there's been much faster growth in this area. If we look at the details as far as weekly wages and the relative size of the detailed industries within the sector, you see kind of in the background here, 3 shaded numbers, 42, 48, and 49. 42 is wholesale trade. 48 is transportation, 49 is warehousing. And so thinking about how these specific areas and their makeup has kind of shifted over the years, you can see where we were in 2014. Wholesale trade agents and brokers was a particularly large industry and paying about $2,000 a week. General warehousing and storage on the warehousing side is a pretty large piece of that sector, paying about $700 per week. And then air passenger transportation, other airport operations is the largest piece in that transportation side. Turning to our most recent data in middle of 2021, you can see the growth that there's been in that general warehousing and storage area, which has had wages come up about $100 per week on average. And so we've had the warehousing side growing, the wholesale side shrinking, and then that transportation side running about in the middle as far as the broad change that's taken place there. Finally, 3 different points looking at some national data. This is looking at the JOLTS survey, which has job hires, separations, and quits. So when you've heard about the quits rate and the Great Resignation, this is where that data kind of comes from. And just doing some comparisons on what across various industries, the hire rate and separation and other rates have been. And so hires and separations largely in balance. Transportation, warehousing, and utilities nationally, though, you can see because it's below that 45-degree line, is one area where the higher rate in recent years and as recently as December of 2021 is significantly outpacing the separation rate. So you have a lot more people flowing into this industry. If you look at how that is for job openings, that black line is still a 45-degree that would represent kind of a 1-to-1 ratio between hires and in this case, job openings. That red line is a 2 openings for every hire. And you can see how many industries are actually closer to that line. Where trade, transportation, and utilities is in that middle, a few more job openings. Transportation, warehousing, utilities has a much higher level of job openings relative to the number of hires. And then wholesale trade is lower on down on the left with slightly lower rates of both hires and openings, still more openings than hires, which is true pretty much everywhere. And also in a lot of these, you'll see way up in the top right-hand side, the accommodation and food service and leisure and hospitality industry. I've seen people observing that as you look at these measures of turnover, one of the predictors of that is probably wages, where the areas that have lower paid jobs on average tend to have much higher rates of turnover, whether that's hires, openings, separations, however you choose to measure it. And then the last chart I have is also the higher rate, but now comparing to the quits rate. And so as much as people are talking about the rate of people leaving jobs, in this case, the red line is 2 hires for every quit. And you see most industries are on this more hires than quits kind of side of the scale. Though, especially transportation and warehousing, there's lots of hires compared to quits. It's almost at that 2-to-1 rate, where you have hires running in about the 5% range, with quits running at about a 2.5% average turnover on average. That sounded weird. But also it's kind of interesting, if you look straight across to the left, you can also see how these industries relatively compare to other industries. And this sector does tend to have higher rates of quits, just measured by how high it is on the chart. I will note the trade, transportation, and utilities number is much closer to the line. One reason for that, you can see just up to the right a little bit here is retail trade. That's a part of that broader roll-up of trade, transportation, and utilities, but isn't included in the list of industry codes for the logistics and operations sector, at least as I most recently looked at it. So that does kind of throw that number off a little bit. And with that, I will take a breath, give you some links to our webpage and email address, as well as some DETR resources, including Employee Envy, UI Envy, and VR Nevada for potential help with employers, as well as our department homepage. I'll take any questions if there's time for it.
We can take a few questions before moving to GoEd. I just want to address the question in the chat from Bill is, can we get the slides? Yes, we will share. I will share these slides and my slides with the group after the presentation meeting. Are there questions about this for Dave? We may have some in aggregate after Chelsea's presentation.
Amy?
Thank you. Yes, George.
This is George Hempy with the Vegas Chamber of Commerce. I just want to make sure I heard correctly with David when he said that they are experiencing in this particular industry more quits than hires. Was that true? Or did I hear wrong?
Sorry, it took me a minute to get my mute button to show back up. Not more quits than hires, but like in every industry, we have more hires than quits, but that relative mix is a bit higher. If I can successfully do this. So in this chart, on the vertical axis, you have your quit rate. On the horizontal axis, you have your hire rate. And this red line is roughly 2 hires for every quit. And so the closer you are to this red line, the more hires you have relative to quits. But because this is one of the relatively higher industries, if you were to just draw a line straight across here, you can see that a lot of other industries fall below the overall quit rate. So there are a lot of hires, but there's also a lot of quits. And so there's a higher level of churn than you might have for an industry that's in a similar place relative to the line, like finance and insurance. And the separation from the red line is pretty similar, but both the hire rate and the quits rate are lower overall. So the higher you move up on from the bottom left to the top right, the more hires and the more quits you have.
So thank you for that answer, David. Do we know if those that are quitting are staying in the industry and just moving to other companies within the industry, or do we think they may be going to other sectors or other industries? If we have that information.
That's for this particular cohort, I don't have right now. This is all, I will say, national data, not state data, because we don't have the industry breakout for this survey. We do have some ability to do some tracking. Typically, when you have a movement from people leaving a particular job, there's a lot of people that end up in a similar industry. And then after that, it tends to be pretty reflective of the overall mix of industries in the state. For example, we looked at people who were in the food service industry at the start of the pandemic and what places did they go? And there were people who moved around within that industry and remained employed within that industry. That was the largest share. But then after that, it typically goes to lots of everything. The people who just get a job somewhere else randomly following a career path, kind of like I experienced.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Scott, yes, you have a question?
Yeah. First off, yeah, just thank you, David. Really appreciated that overview and some information presented in ways that I hadn't seen before. So I appreciate that. To sort of follow up on what George was mentioning, I know this is a national turnover data, again, this higher quit rate, and it's referring back to December 2021. Is the state working on compiling this information specific to Nevada?
This information in this way, I would love to have. Unfortunately, it comes down to us from the National Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I think they've only just started releasing state data, and I suspect that their sample size just isn't large enough to also give us those industry breakouts. I know that there have been requests to increase their funding nationally to help support broader survey products like this because of the interest in products like this. But pending additional money for that program at the national level, it would be tricky. We do look for ways that we can try to leverage administrative data to do similar things, like looking at people who were employed in one industry at one point in time and where they may have gone over time. And that's in the list of things to try to build out using the tools we have these days.
Okay, I would say that would be, to state the obvious, that would be very, very helpful as we continue to evaluate this market. And a 2-month lag is really good. This is December 2021 on the national level. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, David. We will circle back to getting feedback from the broader group, especially as it relates to their experience after the next presentation. So continuing to agenda item number 7, I recognize Chelsea Wahlberg, Research Manager with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Again, take note of items that resonate or differ from your experience.
Hi, everyone. As Amy mentioned, for the record, I am Chelsea Wahlberg. I can pronounce my own name. From the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And I'm going to share some information with you from GoEd's perspective on the logistics and operations sector. Can you all see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So there we go. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide. I think nobody can compete with Mr. Dave Schmidt's presentation on the overall economy, but this gives you a really quick picture of what happened during COVID. Much like the unemployment rate graph that Dave showed, this is employment. It's very sharp, drops really fast, and then comes right back on up. And this is with our benchmarked data that was just released from DETR. So you can see we're almost back, but not quite. So this is looking at how Nevada's economy has diversified over the last decade or so. So in 2010, you can see the mix there. The logistics and operations sector held 5.3%. Just before pre-COVID, just before COVID started, it had diversified to 6.3%. And in 2021, logistics and operations hold 7.6%. So just another thing to point out, you can see the tourism, gaming, and entertainment space shrinking over time. That was a trend that was already happening, that was pushed along by COVID. Looking at logistics and operations industry employment, there are 110,000 or so jobs. That's 4% above the national average. From 2011 to 2021, there's been a 68.1% increase in those jobs, which compares to 19.2% in the nation. So we're growing much, much faster. And the average earnings per job in 2021 was $73,241. Unfortunately, the nation is beating us on that metric. The national average is 84,000-ish. Looking on the left-hand side here, you can see logistics employment by zip code. So you can see where things are concentrated in the state. If we were to zoom into Washoe County and Clark County, you would see a lot more of those yellow, orangey colors, but it's a little bit difficult to see on this small slide. But altogether, there are 6,670 business locations all throughout Nevada. The majority of those are in Southern Nevada. So looking at actual employment by area, and this should have been 2021 jobs. It is 2021 jobs. I just did not update that number. My apologies. But you can see the majority of employment is in Las Vegas. Reno still has a significant amount, almost 30,000. Nevada altogether has that 128. Oh, you know what? I think this is outdated. My bad. But it's pretty similar. Looking at operations industry demographics, 77% is male. The majority of demographics and age range from that 25 to 54, pretty evenly distributed between 25, 34, 35, 44, and 45, 54, all in that 20-ish% range there. And looking at race and ethnicity, white people make up 47.5%, followed by Hispanic or Latino at 29%, and then Black or African American at 13.7%. So this graph can be a little confusing for some people, but I wish this had saved. What a bummer. But this shows how the sectors have changed over time. So an LQ is a location quotient. All that is saying is how much does our portion of employment in a certain sector compare to the national average. So if our location quotient equaled 1, that would mean we have the exact amount in proportion as the US does. So if we're looking at our stars, those would be sectors that are The location quotient is growing over time, and it also has a high location quotient. So mining is a very strong sector. Whereas if we look at tourism, gaming, and entertainment, that's a mature sector. It's decreasing over time in location quotient, but it is a high, it has a large location quotient. So logistics and operations, we would classify as an emerging sector. It doesn't have a particularly high location quotient, but it is increasing over time. So hopefully that's one of our sectors that we can see pushed into that star category, where it's continuing to add that location quotient percent change over time, but it also has a higher than US average amount. So comparing logistics and operations to other industries, we can see it's this very first one at the end here. It is growing over time. I must have opened, I'm so sorry that this is outdated. I did update it, so I will send out the most current one. I must have opened the wrong one, but it's okay. So we can see the expected change and the competitive effect. So the expected growth explained by national growth, and national industry growth was 12,303. The competitive effect over the past 10 years, which just means jobs brought in by that industry, was about 25,000 jobs. And again, our earnings per worker. Looking at the transportation, distribution, and logistics career cluster, which is separate from the logistics and operations industry. This is concentrating on occupations that are related to logistics and operations. So they can be in industries other than logistics and operations, but they're careers that are strongly using those skill sets. So there were 128,000 jobs in that career cluster in 2020. You can see 61% of those were in trade, transportation, and utilities. If we're looking at the 6-digit, the most specific NAICS codes, general warehousing and storage held the majority of those jobs. There were 18,000 of those, not majority, but the most. So 14.2% of that occupational group fell in that industry. And in general warehousing and storage, 55.1% of those jobs are from this career cluster. And if you're wondering where those other jobs come from, there'll be things like administration, management, just IT, all sorts of things that fill those other jobs, other things you need to operate. So looking at top occupations by 2020 job levels, the largest occupation by far, this did not change in 2021, was laborers and freight, stock, and material movers, followed by heavy and tractor trailer truck drivers. The list goes on. If you look at that little green box at the end there, that's where they ranked in GOED's high demand occupational ranking, which I'll get into just a little bit more because it's something I would really love feedback on from your group. But laborers and freight, stock, and material movers ranked 246 out of 750-ish occupations, not high on the list. So you can see none of these large occupations really fall in that top tier 50 plus in demand occupations. I feel like we can really deep dive into in-demand occupation analysis another time if you guys would like, but this is just the list of things that goes into that analysis. What we're lacking is the qualitative side. So if you are looking through that list and you say, this does not make sense to me, I don't understand why laborers are so low on the list, I think they should be higher up, please share that with me. But looking at that list sorted again by the in-demand occupations, logisticians turn up at number 19, very highly ranked, followed by first line supervisors of transportation and material moving workers, ranked at 83. So four logistics operations occupations ended up above 100 in their ranking. So the top 100 is what we really concentrate on typically for development and growth. So looking at educational mapping, I have a whole report on this if you guys want it. It's very, very long, but hopefully you could find some value in it. There are 32 educational programs in the state of Nevada that are related to this career cluster. There were 2,000 completions in 2020 and 17,996 openings. That number increased quite a bit in the presentation that I actually updated, which y'all will get. But these are the top 5 programs. This information has not changed. EMT was the number 1. So that definitely falls more in the transportation of it all, probably less hopeful for this group. But there was also business, commerce, general, electrician, automobile, mechanics, and airframe mechanics. So this slide I don't think is as useful for you, but it just tells you how many programs there were distance versus non-distance and the top 5 institutions. The reason this could be of interest, especially with COVID and future pandemics, hope there aren't any, but we got to prepare. So if you are looking for a concentration of employees in a more remote location, let's say you want to open a company for logistics in Elko or White Pine or somewhere just a little bit more rural, it would be really helpful if there are programs that are available for distance so that those students can learn and not have to go to school in person. So there were 430 distance offered programs in this vein. The school that had the most completions was TMCC up in the north. And then looking at job postings, again, the version you'll get will have January 2021 through December 2021, but the story is pretty much the same. Heavy and tractor truck drivers had the most postings. And these top 5 occupations really didn't change much. So these are the occupations that people are looking for in Nevada right now. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. And like I said, I apologize. The updated version for some reason is not what showed up, but you will receive that information where you can retain it anyway.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Yeah, we will share the presentations after the meeting. So this is the opportunity to provide feedback to both what you saw from Chelsea and from Dave as it relates to your experience. So it's valuable for those of us in government and partners in the system to understand. We look at this information a lot, and it's helpful for us to know how it relates to experiences on the ground or not. We also hope that some of the examples that can be provided for areas that don't resonate can help to inform how to support industry or employers in the industry that may be dealing with some generalized issues. So I will open it up now, and I'm happy to call on you, but would love for you to also raise your hand if you have feedback to provide. I saw Mark shaking his head, so I'm going, or nodding, so I'm going to go to you first again. Go for it with your feedback.
Well, I would say what I saw of the and I'm more familiar with Northern Nevada than I was Southern Nevada, but I think we're seeing exactly what's been been suggested here. Much lower unemployment. I'm also seeing anecdotally from family members they're being pilfered out of state to other locations out of state. So so this appears to be, I think, more not only a state problem but a national problem. And I'm certainly, just from what I'm seeing in terms of the commercials and radio and in television and everything for the warehouse market and the hiring. So everything I'm seeing dovetails with what I'm observing. And then I have a daughter who is in the service industry at a major hotel here in Reno, and they're constantly shorthanded, and she's put into a lot of pressure to work extra hours and overtime and things like that. So everything dovetails with what I'm seeing on the ground here. And then, but I also admit that many of these positions we're talking about, I'm not hiring for that because I'm working on for the vision engineering piece of it. But certainly what's been described today jives with what my experience is.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It is an interesting point that we've talked about with both Chelsea and David, but the lines of the industries sometimes are hard. They're gray, right? They can be kind of fuzzy in practice. So that perspective is valuable too, just to understand, well, I don't really see the jobs that I'm hiring for represented here, even though you are in this industry. So that's really important feedback. I think maybe with some similar feedback, but I'll go to Dong. Do you have feedback on the data that you saw?
No, I mean, I think it's consistent with, whether it's these presentations or some of the other, kind of locally with EDON or whatnot. I think it's all there. I guess I'm just curious if someone here is going to have some solutions or the silver bullets of
That'll be the next section. Yes, thank you.
But no, like especially on kind of that front line, right? It's just a challenge of where are the people going to come from, and then I think kind of the limiting factor is at least in northern Nevada, and I'm sure it is in southern Nevada as well, is just kind of the housing. So how are you going to find people, and what is that affordable entry-level wage, competitive entry-level wage, where businesses can continue operating, and people can make a livable wage, and is it a livable wage based on housing? So
absolutely, that's definitely something that we can highlight in a future meeting too, to give you some specifics in that area and how that's changing over time. Yes, Scott, go for it.
I have one. You had one slide in there that outlined the 5 higher ed institutions and their completions, and it had 2020 year over year, and CSN was down by almost 21%. And one of your slides was kind of jumped off the page, and I know that there's a real challenge in getting students in these classes to complete, which I think is probably why that number is at almost 21%, is that I might suspect that they had the students start the classes but then didn't complete because their skills were already in demand in the marketplace, and they didn't have to complete the coursework. But at the same time, it does kind of show that obviously how much demand is out there, but how does higher education incentivize, or how does workforce employers incentivize students to finish this curriculum? Because it also hurts a school like CSN and how much funding it gets when it doesn't register those completions for their coursework and their training. So it's kind of a bad catch-22 position. And as federal dollars come into the state, finding a way to get those completions up, and it didn't look like the other institutions were having that rate. I think maybe Truckee Meadows was -2%, and the rest were all positive. But so it seemed the most significant for CSN, but is a real issue as we've been looking at some of their advanced manufacturing and training courses as well. And I don't know what the fix is, but getting students to complete the coursework is a real challenge.
Absolutely. That's really helpful feedback too. We will turn to our education partners. I recognize that maybe an hour and a half is not enough time for this meeting. So I'll have to take a look at that for future meetings, but I do want to capture some feedback. Oh yeah, Chelsea, did you have
Yeah, I just wanted to, Scott, I think that's some really interesting feedback on the educational side, but I did want to put a little caveat on that data. It comes from IPEDS. It's the best data that is available to me. And the government funded schools are supposed to report to IPEDS. Sometimes that data, for whatever reason, is not 100% accurate, which bums me out, but I am working with Craig von Collenberg over at the Department of Education, and I'm hoping with future reports I can get really, really comprehensive, great data that includes not only the state schools, but also the private schools. So some of this data may not be reflective of what's going on in the entire educational system. That very well could be what's going on at CSN, and that's really interesting. But yeah, IPEDS is not as great as I wish it was.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that. Any other final comments before we shift gears to the partner side? I know, Dale, we didn't hear from you, and you are down in Southern Nevada, so I think your feedback on what you're seeing is helpful to the conversation.
Yeah, no, the first set of data that we saw on, particularly when it comes to our frontline workers with the amount of quits to new hires, is very accurate to where we are, where we find that we're kind of chasing our tails with people that, especially when it comes to like either attendance or somebody offers suddenly 50 cents more than us or $1 more than us, is, you know, there's people, because there's such a plethora of jobs right now, there's not a real deterrent to, you know, kind of following those baseline things that you get into in a job, especially like attendance. You point out on our system, that's fine. There's one of 10 other places right around us. So we definitely see the turnover. It's not really an issue getting people in for those roles. So again, that's when the hiring numbers make sense too, but we do see a ton of turnover in those markets and in those roles for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other final thoughts on that data before we move to the partner section? All right. Okay, so this is the point in these meetings when we will switch to that partner side to provide those solutions, or at least ideas, and starting to get the conversation started on potential solutions for the future. So each meeting we will have a partner presentation. As this is the first meeting, am scheduled a program that I've been supporting in the state to connect Nevada's industry professionals with Nevada's middle and high school classrooms. And each quarter, these presentations are going to be selected to address some of the key themes that have been pulled from your feedback during these meetings. So we do not have very much time, and I want to make sure to give ample time to the partners that are present. So I'm going to fly through. Can you see my NEPRIS slide? Making sure all my screens here. So I'm going to fly through, give you a high-level overview, and then anybody that wants more detail can reach out to me. So here we go. Okay. So let me scooch back. All right. So this is a program that was selected. The program that has been selected, which is NEPRIS, is supported by the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation and the Nevada Department of Education to address a key gap that's been identified in conversations with employers and educators throughout the state. So I typically would love to ask for your feedback on this tool in the meeting, but I'm gonna skip over that piece, but just to let you know that I am open to receiving that feedback from you at any point, as we are really hoping this will address strengthening that connection with education. I won't talk through all of this, but this addresses the why. Why are we bringing a tool like this and investing heavily in this resource in the state? So there are a number of different reasons, both on the employer and the education side, for why a tool to connect educators with industry professionals virtually is even more valuable in Nevada than it might be elsewhere. All right. So as I've said, this is a tool to connect industry professionals with educators in Nevada. This video says it all, so I'm going to let that, it's 1 minute, so it's very short.
Since 2013, NEPRIS has been bridging the gap between industry and education, bringing real-world relevance and career exposure to all students, while enabling companies and professionals to share their skills and knowledge with the future workforce. Through virtual career days, field trips, mock interviews, capstone project presentations, and more, we break social and geographic barriers to provide exposure to career pathways that students never knew existed.
So what is it that I do currently? So I'm the owner and creator of a brand called Kicksart, which I started in 2014. Initially, I started creating YouTube videos. So here's an example of some of the thumbnails of my content.
You have a love for jump roping. If you've ever been a cheerleader, you could get a scholarship for that. Academic, career specific, and then sports.
In every lab, you will see that we have freezers that are super cold. This is minus 80 degrees, so that the tissues or samples that we have can be preserved for a long, long, long time.
Why you? There's about 4 other people I'm going to sit down with. Why should I choose you over everybody else?
I'm very hardworking and I don't give up until I succeed.
Suggestion would be, I would just focus again, going back to what is really your why? What are you trying to solve, and why is that important?
We're going to say print, data, head, 10. And so this is our syntax. This is how we're speaking Python, speaking with our computer.
Happy connecting.
So I hope that gives just a very high level overview of what this platform does. So as I mentioned, we are investing heavily in this to provide full access to every middle and high school teacher, counselor, administrator, state educator, state administrator in the state of Nevada. It is always free for industry professionals. And what it does is provides a space for either the teacher to request a volunteer or for the industry professional to put up an industry chat. So this is like a webinar where you can present into classrooms. So there are some key takeaways that you can act on at your convenience, and we encourage you to get in there and use it. But you can go to nevada.nepris.com and hit sign up for free. And then you're going to select the second option. Even if you work for a university, you're going to consider yourself in that employer or industry professional side of this for this platform. And then you can browse opportunities. I don't have time to show you right now, but there are open opportunities to connect with middle schools and high schools in Nevada right now. They're looking for volunteers to come in and speak in their classrooms virtually. You can also create your own sessions to talk about whatever it is that you want. You can show a tour of your space. You can talk about careers or technology that you use, anything that you want that you think students might be interested in. We know that this doesn't address some of the critical issues that you're facing with attracting talent, but the hope is that this really strengthens the connections between industry and education that will set up the emerging workforce to be prepared to work in your industry in the future. I this is one of my favorite things, so I really wish I could talk about it more. So one thing to put on your radar is Nevada Robotics Week. We're putting a series of webinars, industry chats together for students the first week of April. So I can share this flyer after the meeting as well. But I put these other days or weeks here just to on there to be on your radar because there are all sorts of things that you can talk about and get together with your peers in industry to talk about to students in Nevada. All right, so I'm going to skip through this sadly. Okay, there it is. I can't show you because I don't have time. All right. Now I have to skip ahead. I've skipped so much. Okay. I am going to move on to agenda item number 10, which is the opportunity for partners to present or introduce themselves and share some of the key resources or calls to action, given what's been shared in particular by employers throughout this conversation. As we demonstrated with employer introductions, please raise your hand, or you may also be called on and unmute yourself at that point. So you can share your name, your organization, and your role. The populations you serve or your stakeholders would be valuable. The most relevant program or opportunity to engage with your program. And if you could try to keep your comments to 1 or 2 minutes, we don't have much time, that would be appreciated. All right, go ahead. I see Earl's hand raised.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Earl McDowell. I'm with Hope for Prisoners. We're a second chance organization that reaches out to people who are formerly incarcerated. We have an extensive program to get them prepared to get jobs in the industry. We have, several employers that we work with. We definitely want to engage with employers, more so in logistics. I always look at the sectors as the area to put people, so they have the training. That's the population we work with. We have like a whole week of training they go through to prepare them. Then we have an 18-month program, continually connect with those individuals so they can be successful. So all we basically do is talk with employers, find out their needs, and making sure that individuals are trained, because we can provide training for them in specific areas, and also do partial funding for that person if he needs to train in specific things like, say, machine operator. We can do those things. So we're just looking to partner with each and every individual that deals with logistics and so forth. We have our upcoming grand opening of our new location, which I'll send out to everybody. You should attend that. It's going to really be great. We have a new location that we'll be having, which will be one-stop shop for everything that we do and other partners. So again, Earl McDowell with Hope for Prisoners.
Wonderful, thank you. Go ahead, Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Williams. I'm the Dean of Business and Social Sciences at Truckee Meadows Community College. And we offer a logistics program where we have a certificate of achievement, an associate's degree, and a bachelor's degree in logistics operations management. And we have about 60 current majors going through the program. And we work with lots of our local employers who serve on our advisory board to give us advice on what they need and what they'd like to see us training on. And also, of course, helping our students with internships and work experience, and also employing them when they graduate, which is awesome. So we're, of course, trying to grow our program. We see, of course, the same things the employers were mentioning and what they're looking for and what they're desperate for. And certainly our advisory board members are constantly seeking employees and feeling desperate for employees, honestly, right now, particularly entry level, but at all levels. One thing that I've noticed that didn't come up that I thought might be of interest is we're hearing that when they have good employees, they'd like to, of course, promote from within, but not always do those people have the skills that it takes to be an actual leader. And so that's an area that we're trying to address in our education, is training on some of those leadership skills. Some of the businesses are actually asking for some customized training in some of those skills so that we can help those people that might have come in more entry level with gaining some leadership skills, communication skills, dealing with difficult people, helping with, coordinating people, those kinds of things. So we're also working on that, even on the non-credit side, to try and help people be more promotable from within the industry. So look forward to working with you all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, Gary, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Gary Watson. I'm the president of Teamsters Local 533 in Northern Nevada. I negotiate labor agreements, dispute resolution between employee, employer, labor-related issues. We represent a vast majority of workers. We say A to Z, airline pilots to zookeepers. In the Teamster world, we have a lot of workers in the warehouse, package, freight, rail, and air. A lot of, as everybody's talking here, a lot of issues in our economy here in Nevada is the market, the rise in the market isn't sustaining the workforce. This forces a lot of job shopping, for wages. So anyways, nice to meet everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Gary. All right, Tom, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tom Nicholas. I'm the Director of Workforce Development at Nevada State College. It's a brand new program. We're just starting to enter the area of non-credit programming, and the area we're kind of focusing right now is building up on our management leadership programs, a lot like Amy was discussing, helping people become supervisors, become better managers across different areas. We're looking at having some general training, but also specialty areas such as logistics or possibly manufacturing or healthcare, education, some of our areas where we have a lot of strength. We have been looking into, we actually commissioned a study trying to get some ideas of how we can enter the logistics and supply chain arena. A lot of positive feedback. So we've been looking to make partnerships with some of our educational partners as well as industry. And even we talked a little bit with GoEd about that. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know we have about 1 minute left here. If there are other partners that wanted to introduce themselves or share, you can go ahead and raise your hand or unmute yourself now. Give you. Go ahead.
Hi, Amy.
Go ahead, George.
I just wanted to say that I agree 100% with you in the NEPRS program. I was talking to my boss just last week, and I said that in my opinion, the weakest link in our chain right now is with the lack of our, not necessarily anybody's fault, maybe it's all our faults, but ability to really engage the K through 12 and post-secondary groups with business industry in an active way. So NEPRS would be a great program in our opinion. And we need to see a lot more of the internships, the apprenticeships or hybrids of that, because our future workforce really needs a better idea of what these industries, especially the growing industries, what they are and the options they have. So I could be in more support of NEPRS. It's free to all of us. You all have already paid for it. And we're planning and trying to, as quickly as possible, to start getting a group of employers to where they can do the presentations for the classes and vice versa. So thank you so much for that resource. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, George. And I do acknowledge that we're at time here, and I understand that some of you may need to jump off. I do need to continue, especially because we still have public comment left. So I do apologize that we just don't have enough time. The next meeting will be 2 hours. So with that, agenda item number 11, I want to quickly get the future meetings on your radar. We're looking at 2 remaining meetings for 2022, which will likely be June 6th and September 5th, 2 hours long. I will be sending a poll out to the voting members to make sure that we plan the time around their schedules, and then we'll be posting that as soon as that's available. Before we move on, I just need to ask if there were any voting members that arrived after roll call, which I think was just one, and I don't see him here. Give him a second. Not here. Okay. So the final agenda item, which is number 11, before we adjourn, is public comment. So although many of you have had the opportunity to share, this is a required space for members of the public to provide a comment. As a reminder, no formal action may be taken on any issues not included in the posted agenda. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person, which you can raise your hand to be recognized for now. Seeing no comments, I'm going to just address that there are some other key partners on the call that did not share during an introduction that I've put some notes in the chat here. So if you do have details that you wanted to share through the follow-up notes, please do share them with me. I think you both have my contact information, but I'll put it in the chat also. So I can make sure to get those resources out, and then we will have some more time at the future meeting. All right, so with that, I hereby move to adjourn the meeting.